Testing. Ooh. We've all read a map before, and something essential to know, something you probably find obvious, is that all maps operate on scale. You know that the lines and shapes on your phone screen represent much larger objects than the shapes representing what store in the mall you want to browse next. And if you're reading these maps, you'd never expect for 1 inch of distance on a map to equate to 1 inch of distance in the physical world. But what if it did? And the essayist and poet Jorge Luis Borges' 1-paragraph short story on exactitude in science, he explores the concept of a society that is so obsessed with creating a perfect representation of the world, cartographers create a map with a 1-to-1 scale. Every object in the physical world exists in equal scale on the map, which creates a sort of paradox, as a detailed map ends up covering the things it was supposed to represent due to its scale. The image of the map laying on top of its physical likeness in the real world is a great way to visualize what philosopher Jean Baudrillard called the hyperreal. The hyperreal is the inability to distinguish the real from the signifier of it, a condition in which reality and fiction are seamlessly blended together so that there is no clear distinction between where one ends and the other begins. Just as maps rely on distortion to project 3D forms into a 2D medium, everything we consume, TV, books, movies, social media, takes on a distortion when they try to represent reality. Even when the media does try to mirror reality perfectly, from reality TV to realist literature like Flaubert's Madame Bovary, this in its essence is the map we first discussed. Even if it matches physical space and scale, it is still just a representation that covers over the original reality it was trying to show. Yet, can we see this distortion? When Madame Bovary was published, the anti-heroine Emma Bovary was viewed as nearly perfect representation of what so many women faced at the time, a sentence of domestic servitude that led to a life of unfulfillment. Even now, living in a context far removed from 18th century France, the trope of the desperate bored housewife is something we all recognize, and while this idea is based in some sort of reality, it's just become like a copy of a copy of a copy, representing and adapting the real into a map that's not too different from the one Borges described. And if a woman today relates to this trope, is this a reflection of her real life, or is it just a reflection of a mirror that she's seen in movies and television? This boundary, the line between signified and signifier, is very difficult to sense in our quote-unquote society as the spectacle, as Guy Debord would say. Baudrillard often used Disney World as a way to explain the hyperreal. Disney World's architecture mocks the real world, the idyllic main street that is at the heart of many American myths. It's a small world, after all. We see familiar tropes and representations spit back at us, but the grand commodity and spectacle of it all is clear, which leaves you, the visitor, with comfort and recognizing that Disney World is a fantasy, and without having to recognize the hyperreal in your own daily life. After all, when you enter Disney, you're greeted by a plaque, a direct boundary between real and representation, marked by "Here you leave today and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy." Creepy. At Disneyland, the lines are clear. You enter and you exit, and experiencing the hyperreal feels like a consensual exchange. But then the fawns jump the shark. Now, if you haven't heard of the idiom jumping the shark, it refers to the 70s hit sitcom Happy Days, a show that revolves around the everyday hijinks of family life in Milwaukee during the 50s. The comfort of nostalgia and simplicity of the plot lines, along with standout character, the Fonz, skyrocketed the show into huge cultural relevance. But, as happens, with ratings dropping in the late 70s and some questionable decisions from show producers alongside some self-righteous water ski skills from actor Henry Winkler, this all led to an episode being aired of the Fonz jumping a shark. And for many viewers, this marks the beginning of the end and has become a reference to the moment when shows go overboard in their spectacle. The distortion and disconnection from reality becomes clear, stark, and this awakening is jarring to the audience. When you watch a show, especially one chock full of good old nostalgic flair around everyday life like Happy Days, you don't get a Disney plaque warning that what you're watching is completely fake. The copy of 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 the copy begins to come into focus when something jumps the shark. If the show is too ridiculous to believe, is it even worth watching for its delusional production of the reality we want to live in? And to an even more jarring extent, it puts into question the labels and archetypes we use to form our own identities. Imagine the dysphoria if an Archie comic reader from back in the 50s related with the goofy, clumsy, yet definitely ultimately desirable character of Archie Andrews watched the infamously stupid, epic highs and lows of high school football speech in an episode of Riverdale, a show that is notorious for jumping the shark and taking Archie comics lore on a strange detour into absurd teen soap drama. The identity of the average American teenage guy, loving sports and cars and girls, is undressed by Riverdale's absurdity to be shown for what it is, nothing more than a framework built upon a copy of a copy of a copy.
Sports.
Not me. I dropped out in the 4th grade to run drugs to support my nana.
That means you haven't known the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of high school football. But you will. You want me to watch your girl for you?
That's right. There are a lot of hungry guys around. I gotta find somebody I trust to keep an eye on her.
Fonzie, it's so sweet of you to pick me up like this. I'm really gonna miss you when you're away at Demolition Derby.
Yeah, but just think about that great reunion scene we can have when I get back. You're gonna do this for me, right, Rich?
Oh, yeah, sure, Fonz.
Cunningham, your aces.
Come on, when you hit the road,